Bibliometrics is the application of mathematical methods and other quantitative methods to the recorded knowledge or recorded information. The term bibliometrics comprises of two terms again. Biblio means books, metrics means to measure. When the mathematical methods are applied to different disciplines like economics, an entirely new subject termed as econometrics is formed. Similarly, biometrics, psychometrics and other subjects also were formed. When we apply these mathematical methods to library and information science, we call it as bibliometrics. By using quantitative analysis, it is possible to measure the scattering of the articles in journals and also to measure the journal productivity, the productivity of the authors, and also we can measure the use of the growth and obsolescence of literature, use of the books by the users, and then apart from these we can also measure the patterns of research being conducted at the regional level, national level, and also the extent of cooperation between the research groups, so on and so forth. A number of bibliometric studies were conducted in the area of bibliometrics, and still there is a lot of debate going on regarding the validity of the bibliometric studies. Now we have with us two professors, two experts to discuss this topic. Professor K.Somasekhara, Department of Library and Information Sciences, Andhra University. Dr. Divakar, he heads the library services of CCMB, Hyderabad. Professor Somasekhara garu, kindly tell our viewers what is bibliometrics, what are the definitions, how the term bibliometrics has been defined, and the origin and development of the term. Could you please elaborate on this to our viewers?
So, the concept of bibliometrics and the application of bibliometrics became important in libraries for several reasons, though it had certain limitations. When we develop collection, we must be very careful whether the developed collection would be useful to the users or not, be it a book or be it a journal. And most of the libraries are funded by out of public funds. When we are spending public funds, there is a great responsibility on us to verify the acquired material or the subscribed journal or subscribed material is being used or useful to the users or not. Therefore, the bibliometrics and the application of bibliometrics became an important aspect in libraries. The application of bibliometrics, though the term used sometime in 1969, but the application of mathematics or statistics or combination of both in the library activities is as old practice. If you see the definitions given by various authors in their own words, Alan Pritchard, considered as the pioneer or the prime person in bibliometric studies, and he in his terms, bibliometrics means application of mathematics and statistical methods to books and other media of communication. And if you see the other definition given by Sen Gupta, organization, classification and quantitative evaluation of publication pattern of all micro and macro communication along with their authorship by mathematical and statistical calculation. So, this is, if you see these two definitions, the second definition is bit specific and covering more areas. But whether if peripherally Pritchard's definition or Sen Gupta definition, say application of mathematics or statistics for the material that we are acquiring in libraries.
Thank you, Somasekhara garu, for giving the definitions and the about bibliometrics. Dr. Divakar, actually, why do we need this method of study? in libraries, and what are the advantages and utilities of this study and applications of this study to library and information sciences? Could you kindly elaborate?
Thank you, Saroja. See, measuring things around us, is a human instinct. In our daily life, we measure various parameters. Suppose in summer, if you think it's very hot, we try to see, Hyderabad temperature is 42 degrees centigrade. Okay, so that we take some remedial action for it. For example, you switch on your air conditioner or switch on your fan. Okay, if it's very cold, you say Hyderabad temperature is 20 degrees or 19 degrees. So that you pull out your warm clothing and then make yourself comfortable. Similarly, suppose it rains outside. Okay, we say yesterday it rained 6 millimeters. Okay, day before yesterday it rained 10 millimeters. Okay, so when you make these kinds of measurements of, let's say for example rainfall, we can use it for agricultural planning. Okay, farmers can decide when to sow the seeds, how much, what kind of operations they can do, etc. Similarly, in library and information centers also, we use these measures, these statistical methods, in a more efficient way, so that we can plan our services, utilize our resources in a more efficient way. As you have rightly mentioned, the term bibliometrics itself comprises of biblio and metrics. Biblio means book. Etymologically, biblio means book. Metrics is measurements. This is similar to what people use terms like, for example, biometrics. When biologists use statistical methods, they call it biometrics. Similarly, econometrics. Similarly, psychometrics. So various metrics are being used by different people. Similarly, we LINS people also are using these techniques, and then we call it bibliometrics. And for example, we also have a concept called librometry, for example. Okay, so our pioneer S.R. Ranganathan has mentioned about librometry in the year 1948. He was invited as a guest for the ASLIP conference in London in 1948. And then after hearing to a speech by J.D. Bernard, he was very much impressed by J.D. Bernard's talk, and he rose up suddenly and then said, we people also should develop the area of librometrics. For the first time he coined the term librometrics. In that sense, India gave the term librometrics to the world in 1948 through the mouth of Ranganathan. But subsequently, then in 1969, there was a conference at Bangalore, at Documentation Research and Training Center, Bangalore, popularly known as DRTC at Bangalore, where Ranganathan presented a paper on librometry. So in that, he talks about how he has used involuntarily these statistical methods in planning the various services, planning the furniture, planning the collection, etc. in Madras University Library. And in the same conference, Professor Neelamegan also presented a paper about the importance of bibliometrics and the research that is being carried out at Bangalore in India. So in that way, India has been pioneering in the field of bibliometrics since the beginning. Even now, we lead the field in the world. Then coming back to your question of the how to use these phenomena, these patterns in our day-to-day activity. For example, if we talk about librometry, for example, we do three basic things in a library. We do selection of material for the library, and then we do organization. We also do dissemination. So looking at these three basic principles, and when you apply quantitative methods, so we can think of how to organize our collection, or how to rationalize the acquisition policy, for example. So which are the best used books, which are the best used journals in a library. So concentrate more on them, so have our acquisition policy in such a way that we buy books and journals that are of maximum utility to our clientele. Similarly, when you talk about the second part, that is the organization part of our collection. Most of our libraries are now having the problem of space constraint. Okay, then use some of these measures for deciding which is to be kept as active collection, maybe perhaps which is to be kept as inactive collection, to plan the kind of stacking that you will be doing in a library. That is what we mean by collection management. Similarly, for dissemination also, we offer a range of services to our people. Okay, depending on the user response, user needs, depending on the statistical the inferences that you make out of your bibliometric studies, you plan your services. You decide when to start a service or when to discontinue a service, whether users are happy with your service. So use all these statistical parameters, so that we will be able to run our centers in a more efficient way. And then apart from that, when you come out of libraries, then there is also a lot of phenomena called scientometric phenomena, informametric phenomena, etc. We can actually look at these bibliometric phenomena beyond the scope of library and information science. For example, we can do mapping of science. We can decide, whether America is leading in science or Japan is leading in science, or where do Indians stand. So, what is the productivity of Indian authors? What is the productivity of authors from Hyderabad? So, such studies also form part of bibliometrics in general. So, in that way we can do beyond beyond our scope of library and information science, for benefiting the society. You making use of some of these techniques.
And Professor Somasekhara, so we have come across so many terms: librometry, bibliometrics, scientometrics. A number of publications were being published in the area of scientometrics nowadays, and infometrics, webometrics. Can you kindly distinguish, demarcate, or kindly make the distinction between the terms to our students?
So, this is nothing but narrating the history of bibliometrics. To understand those terms, let us start with statistical analysis coined by F.J. Cole and Ailes in 1917. So, that means before 69 this concept was there in different direction. Later in 1922, when Hume, statistical bibliography, he used that term, more or less same purpose. And just a while ago, Dr. Divakar mentioned Dr. S.R. Ranganathan and his contribution towards this field, librometry or librometrics in 1948. Now, we will go to the other terms: centometrics, econometrics, infometrics, and webometrics, and so on. So, centrometrics is a study, it is evaluation of factors like scientific process, levels of scientific development, social relevance, science of science, and science policy. If you go through these terms, you will understand a lot of things. Say, we have to understand the scientific progress. And I came to know in research laboratories, when situation arises to assess the quality between two research scientists for their promotion or for some other activity, these centrometrics are being used. So, therefore, and here they mentioned social relevance. We have to see whether the research has any social relevance or not. And there is a great comment on Indian research. Social relevance is in Indian research, the social relevance is not up to that mark. But in if you value the centrometrics through this method, if the articles are valued, and we have to give some rating for social relevance and the policy of the government, policy of the institution, etc. That is about the centrometrics. When you come to the infometrics, it is the analysis of information productive patterns, how information is being produced. Say it is a single author or two authors or three authors, or how many articles are published in a discipline in a particular period or geographical area. All these things are covered in this infometrics. Most of the professionals are using webometrics because of the availability of information technology and other facilities. There is a scope for us to use websites thoroughly. So, it is the webometrics, it is still developing area. It is like how many times a website is being used or what purpose they are using. So, if you can rate the website in that way, that goes to the webometric study.
May I supplement what Professor Somasekhara has said? In my opinion, when you make a quantitative study of documents contained within the four walls of a library, we call it librometry. Okay, the rule for librometry is that the users are the documents pertain to a given library. Okay, say B.R. Ambedkar Open University Library or Usman University Library. We do a quantification on the books must be contained within a library. Then we call it librometry. Suppose you remove the term library, okay, then it becomes bibliometrics. Okay, when you do a general purpose study without confining to documents housed in any particular library, then it becomes bibliometrics. Okay, it should general study, like bibliometric analysis of pathology literature or bibliometric analysis of microbiology literature. You don't confine it to any given library, then we call it bibliometrics. And if the same study is confining to a particular branch of sciences, okay, then we call it scientometrics. Scientometrics. And scientometrics, we go a little step ahead. We go also into trying to describe what we call mapping of science, describing how different countries are behaving. We also look at the socio-political, socio-economic angles of scientific productivity. Then when we go down from the level of book or journal article to the level of the content as such or the concept as such, then it becomes informatics. We go down to the level of concepts. And then when we look at this phenomena as a resource on the internet, then as professor has rightly said, we call it webometrics. So how many times an article has been downloaded from a particular website, or how many times a particular person has visited a particular website. Why do people visit a given website? Okay, do they visit it during daytime, during weekends, or do they have any particular preferences? Making metric studies of all such things come under webometrics.
Can you tell us the application and use of scientometrics in research?
Yeah, for example, the earliest studies that are reported in the literature are from a Japanese group headed by a person called Yuasa. That was way back in 1962. He made a very interesting study. Looking at the historic documents of science, and then he comes out with a proposition that in the good olden days, that is during 1540, it seemed Italy was leading in the S&T in the world. The Italians were the leaders in science and technology in the world during 1540 to 1610, and then followed by Britishers, from 1660 to 1730. Then French people came into being, and then French people ruled the world of science between 1770 to 1830. Then was the days of Germans, and Germans were really pioneers in science and technology in the world, and they ruled the world of science from 1810 to 1920 for 110 long years. For 110 years, Germans were doing the best science in the world. And then from 1920 onwards, the whole scenario changed, and then it's America and America. From 1920 onwards, for the past 87 years, America is leading the world. Perhaps the next chance is for India and China. Maybe we will lead the world, maybe from 25 years, 30 years from now. So understanding these kind of phenomena, like who is doing what in the world, which countries are leading. So all this comes under the gamut of scientometrics. Okay, and we also call it mapping of science, geographic mapping of science. And then we can even do country studies. For example, within India, if you take, where is R&D, where is scientific productivity concentrated? How much Hyderabad is producing in terms of scientific literature? How much Bangalore is producing? How much New Delhi is producing? So which city is leading in India? It's not necessarily at the world level, even at regional level we can do that. Okay, even at the city level, we can try to map how much University of Hyderabad is producing. So how much the Usmania University is producing, or how much in my own institute, like the CSR laboratories are producing. It's interesting to observe these phenomena about the research productivity. And we also can extrapolate to some extent, as Somasekhara has said, try to bring in some kind of qualitative element. We believe that quantity leads to quality.
Yes.
We believe that quantitative parameters will ultimately lead to qualitative evaluation.
Basically, there are three laws: the Bradford's law of scatter, Gibbs' law of word frequency, and Lodkow's law of author productivity. Dr. Divakar, could you please elaborate on the Bradford's law of scatter?
Sure. Bradford's law of scattering is one of the most studied and most applied laws of bibliometrics in the world today. This was first enunciated in the year 1934. Bradford wrote a paper in a journal called Engineering, It was published on January 26, 1934 in the journal Engineering. He calls it Bradford's law of scattering. And what he says in this law is that you take any discipline, and then he feels that a small number of journals, this is about journals productivity, a small number of journals contribute to the substantial portion of a particular field. So, he has studied this phenomena in a small area called applied geophysics and lubrication. He took two areas, these two are actually different, applied geophysics and lubrication. So, during the 1930s, so he collected all the literature, he in fact created a bibliography on applied geophysics and lubrication, and he found similarities in both the fields. And what he says is that he has collected at that time something like 1332 articles in this area, and he says that 1/3 of these articles, that is 429, has been contributed by just 9 journals. Just 9 journals contribute to the 1/3 of that literature, and he says that another 59 journals contributed to another 1/3, and a greater chunk, that is 258 journals were required to get hold of the remaining 1/3. So, and this phenomena he says holds good in any scientific discipline. And subsequently, I.N. Sengupta of Calcutta, he also done lot of studies on Bradford's law, and then he also verified, he has come out with lot of articles, he proved it in the area of microbiology, Bradford's law, and we can practically apply it to any area. And what Bradford's law, as I said, says that very small number of journals contribute to 1/3 of the literature, say 2 to 30% of it, and slightly more number of journals contribute to the remaining 1/3, and large number of journals contribute to the least 1/3. So, this has tremendous implication for our operational planning.
So, this law can be applied to measure which are the core journals in a particular journals, which journals form the nucleus in that particular subject.
Absolutely, absolutely. For example, these what you have mentioned use the word core journals. What we say is buy only these core journals for your library. Buy only ensure that you buy these core journals for your library, and the remaining 1/3, constituting slightly more numbers. If they are available in the local libraries, don't buy. If they are not available in the nearby libraries, then you buy that. And third category, never buy them. It would be cheaper to ask for a photocopy, buy photocopies, than buying all those, all those 200 or 250 journals and then maintaining in the library.
And the Gibbs law of word frequency, what does it say? What is it about?
This is another law in bibliometric studies. So, this is based on the word occurrence in text. So, instead of word occurrence, sometimes we may call it a concept occurrence. If a concept is frequently referred in the article, based on that we can rate the value of that article, which helps us to understand the capacity of the author as well as the journals. So, Gibbs law in this way stated, if the words occurring in natural language text of sizable length were listed in the order of decreasing frequency, then the rank of any given word in the list would be inversely proportional to the frequency of occurrence of the word.
Yeah. Could you kindly explain the impact factor?
Impact factor is a scientometric indicator. It's a bibliometric or scientometric indicator, and these are values. Like we have share price index. If you open the Economic Times or Business Standard, you find share price indexes. Similarly, a particular company is rated, by the share value. Similarly, for journals, for evaluating how good a journal is, or whether it is very good, average, or fair, some ratings have been made. These ratings are called impact factors, and these impact factor values are given by Institute for Scientific Information based in Philadelphia in America. Now it has been owned by, it has been sold off, ISI has been sold off to Thomson Scientific. Now Thomson Scientific is owning it, it is a multinational company, and they bring out these impact factor values once in a year. Generally in the month of July, in the first week of July.
Okay.
So, we now have 2006 impact factors just released about 2 weeks back. But these impact factor lists, they give you something like 6,000 plus journals only are covered in that. And then there is a basis for calculating the impact factor. What they do is, for example, for 2006 impact factor value, what they do is they take the total number of citations received by a given journal during 2006, okay, divided by the total number of source articles that the given journal has published during the previous 2 years. That is, for example, to illustrate, for example, if you take the impact factor of Nature, so they count how many times Nature articles have been cited in 2006 divided by the total number of source articles for which these citations have been received during the previous 2 years, that is 2004 and 2005. And this varies from journal to journal. For example, Nature, Science, Cell, etc., they are considered to be high impact factor journals, like the values are something like 28, 29, 30 around. And we have at the lower end, we have journals like Current Science from India, for example, it is around 1, Journal of Biosciences is about 1.2. So, it varies from country to country, discipline to discipline also there is variation in the impact factor values.
The load cost law of author productivity. Actually, this load cost law of author productivity deals with the productivity of the authors. Like we know that in a particular area, in a particular subject of interest, suppose we take the English drama, Shakespeare, we immediately recollect the name of Shakespeare. If we go to English poetry, we recollect the name of Milton. So as Ranganathan to the field of library and information science. That is, the contribution of certain authors in a particular subject field is prolific. So, they are identified with the discipline. So, this kind of author productivity also we can measure using the load cost law. There are certain limitations in the bibliometric studies. These limitations can be the limitations of funding, the reputation of the institution, and then the ethics. If unethical practices in the citations will also lead to bias. So, I thank the experts.